My name is Alastair Miller, and as a photographer, I'm normally behind the camera. But in this series, with Viking, I'm exploring the Maltese archipelago, Sicily, and Naples. Today, with Novka, we visit St. Johns CoCathedral before learning about the great siege of Valletta and the history of the city, followed by the naming ceremony of the Viking Mars. Welcome to Malta's capital, Valletta, a UNESCO World Heritage Site built by the Knights of St. John in the 16th century, and today a thrilling cacophony of the old and the new, embracing its magnificent grand harbour. I began with a visit to a masterpiece of Baroque architecture, St. Johns CoCathedral, where a painting by one of my favourite artists had just been restored. Wow, it's been a long time I've wanted to come and see this painting.
Yes, this is one of the Caravaggio's masterpieces.
And it's just been restored?
Yes, recently, and this is the biggest painting he have made and the only one that he had signed. If you look down the neck of the St. John the Baptist, you will realize there is the blood coming out, and underneath the blood there is his signature.
And tell me something about the man, Caravaggio. He was quite a wild cat, wasn't he?
Yes, he has a hectic history. He was born in Milan, and his father used to work with a very wealthy family. And he experienced everything, poverty, richness, by watching this family that took care of him after his father passed away. And unfortunately, he grew up as a very tempered person, and he could get into conflict very easily.
He was a fighter.
Yes, he was a fighter. And they say that he murdered a very important person back in Italy. Then he escaped to Naples and then was invited to come to Malta by the Knights of St. John, by the Grand Master of the Vigna Court, to paint. And he was commissioned to do these paintings for the oratory here, where we are now. This was from 1608. And basically, the Knights of St. John, in a way, forgiven him this murder that he had done back in Italy and made him a knight also. Not a high-ranking knight, but they did honor him to be a knight. Unfortunately, he did not find so much peace here in Malta as well. They say he was very often conflicting with the knights, and he was one time not invited to this party of a high-ranking knight, and he just showed up there. And the chaos started. He started arguing with him, and in front of all the guests, he grabbed him, and that was the reason why Caravaggio was imprisoned here in Malta also. And they punished him by sending him out from the order, and finally he also escaped from Malta after being imprisoned in Fort St. Angelo, which is just across Valletta in the area of Three Cities.
And he had a particular style of painting, didn't he?
Yes.
With the light and the dark.
Yes, they say that he changed the course of painting, playing with the colors. This style would be called chiaroscuro.
Chiaroscuro.
Yes, light and dark. And you will notice lots of light about the main scene, and at the background lots of dark. This is depicting the beheading of St. John the Baptist. Usually he used the red cloth around the main character, and it was also a symbol of martyrdom, apart from being used on a main character. And if you look at the painting, it looks like a 3D also. At the background there is the door, and there are two prisoners looking through the window. I am sure that the prisoners were not able to look as on the painting through the window for the fresh air, because we are talking about the prison, so they were kept in, but he painted them out of his imagination. those who despised him would be looking at the scene.
But the lighting, it's almost a photographic kind of
Yes,
lighting, isn't
yes.
it? Like a studio lighting in a way.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it's very dramatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very dramatic, and every muscle, every detail is perfectly painted. If you look,
Yeah, the back of the
the back,
of the
there is the
murderer
rope
is-
coming down also,
Yeah.
which many people don't notice, but it's on the corner. And
Oh yes, yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
there is the rope, the door.
Yes.
This is the moment when they killed Saint John the Baptist. Basically, Saint John the Baptist was killed because of Salome, the girl.
Because of?
Salome.
Oh, Salome.
Salome. This is the story of Salome, who was in love with him, but he refused her. It was her birthday, and the general who was going to marry her mother asked her, "What would you like as a present?" And she asked for the head of Saint John. So basically, in a way, they murdered him because of the revenge of a girl, and this is what Caravaggio had painted. Basically, you have a servant waiting to receive the plate on the silver plate, the one next to her with the hands on her head, showing the moment of tragedy. And if you look down next to his head, there is the sword without blood. They say that first they tried to murder him, to kill him with the sword, but because he was a saint, the sword refused and it just fell. It fell out of the hand of the executioner and just remained there on the floor. But he has a knife. The executioner has a knife
Behind his back.
Exactly, which he used to murder him and to cut off his head. And then there is the blood coming out of the neck, and underneath the blood there is his signature.
It's an amazing painting.
Yeah, this is one of his masterpieces. Michelangelo Merisi di Caravaggio.
Indeed, an amazing painting in a dazzlingly decorated cathedral. And resting under the intricate marble floors are the tombs of some 400 knights and officers of the Order of St. John. I was amazed that visitors are allowed to walk over them with their shoes on. Okay, it's impossible to come to Malta and not hear about the Order of the Knights of St. John. And maybe you could just explain to me, who were these knights and what's their connection with Malta?
So basically, the Knights of St. John, they were this group of monks, hospitallers and military order, a brotherhood that was ruling Malta between 1530 and 1798. They were a mixture of different nationalities, and actually our 8-pointed cross resembles and represents 8 nationalities from where the knights used to come. So they were from different countries, usually high-ranking families, and the only group of men living as monks, not marrying, not having children. And basically the city where we are at the moment, Valletta, was meant to be built as the city gentleman for gentlemen, and they started building it in 1566 after the great siege that happened in 1565, just a year before.
And the knights were given Malta, is that correct?
Yes, the knights were given Malta by Charles V. They were looking for a new place where they can start a new life after losing Rhodes against the Ottoman Empire, unfortunately, and one of the options was to come to Malta. Malta, it is a small island, and they had to come here and start from the scratch practically, but we are perfectly located in the center of the Mediterranean Sea, and since the mission of the knights was to protect the Christian world practically against the Muslim world, they thought that from this location that would be a perfect place to do so. As if the Ottomans have taken the islands in 1565, then they would spread to Sicily and towards Italy and try to take over other countries. So the knights thought that Malta would be a perfect place to defend.
And they felt it was their duty or their job to protect
it was
the Christian, the Catholic world against the Ottomans and the Muslim world.
Yes, that was their mission. That was the main activity. And apart from being hospitalers, building hospitals, also a military order in order to.
And they built Valletta, the city which is just below us here.
Yes, the city, they built Valletta. When they started building the city, they knew that the stronger fortifications are needed, not to make the same mistake after losing Rhodes in Greek islands, and therefore they started with the fortifications all around, and it took them some 5 years just for the walls.
Mm-hmm.
And they were also using Valletta as a quarry, building from one side to another side. Obviously, after the war, the emperor had to send them lots of slaves, because usually the question is from where did they get the help? Usually it was from the slaves, and to join the Knights of St. John, one had to offer something. So I couldn't come there with an empty bag and say, I want to become a knight. I would have to give either a very important name, if coming from any other country, or my properties, my belongings that I have in France, let's say, for example, would be assigned to the Knights of St. John. And that's how they had always money and always sources to build more and keep on living on the island.
And I guess being a woman wouldn't help either.
No.
I mean, there were no women knights, were there?
No women knights,
No.
only men. And as I said, no marriages were allowed.
And tell me about this building, because this is part of the story, this building behind us.
Basically this was built in the 17th century.
Mm-hmm.
It used to serve as the auberge of Castile, Leon and Portugal, built by the Maltese architect Girolamo Cassar, who was actually the assistant of the first military engineer that started the city of Valletta. So designs are in a Baroque style. And this is one of the few auberges that had survived the Second World War, because mostly Valletta and the Grand Harbour area was bombarded during the Second World War. Today the building serves as the office of the Prime Minister of Malta.
Fantastic. Yeah. So what happened to the knights in the end? What was their downfall?
The knights were expelled from Malta in 1798 by Napoleon Bonaparte. And then they had the 2 years of French Revolution until the British took over in 1800.
So in today's Malta, there are still Knights of the Order of St. John?
There are, but today they are more as a hospitaller order, not a military as in the beginning, as before in 1530s.
Like a charity?
Charity, they take care of the sickness around the hospitals, also in other continents, not just in Europe. So they're more like a hospitaller order at the moment.
And if I went to their headquarters, which I believe is just over there, and I knocked on the door and I said, hey, can I be a Knight of the Order of St. John? Would they welcome me in and say, no problem?
I think today it's easier, and I heard that they even accept women today, nowadays.
Really?
Even women can join, yes.
But I don't have to bring...
They're being more flexible, not as before. So
I don't have to bring a gift.
I think that's not as before. No. Not. Maybe a surname. Maybe you would need to be a doctor or something they can use as
to be useful in the charity. Yeah,
exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
So, the Great Siege of Valletta, tell me about it.
Basically, the Great Siege happened in 1565. It was the war between the Knights of St. John and the Ottoman Empire. The Knights of St. John were defending the Maltese islands and the Christian world from across the 3 cities, and the Ottomans used this peninsula where we are walking now, because this was not built at the time when the Great Siege happened, to attack the Knights who were living across in the 3 cities. It was a siege for 3 months, from June to September.
A 3-month siege?
3-month siege. Okay. The Knights had only about 7,000. They were only about 7,000 at that time, and even the local people, the Maltese and the boys of age of 16 had to participate in this war in order to defend the islands, because when the Ottomans attacked, they came with 40,000 soldiers. And the war was happening exactly here at the Grand Harbour, overlooking on
So how did the siege end?
Practically, they managed to save the islands, most probably thanks to the fort that they had to defend from them. And the Ottomans gave up in the last bit. They gave up. They managed to capture some Ottomans as well, the knights, and they were doing the slavery work for them later on. But there is a story that they were also capturing the knights, the Ottomans, cutting off their heads and throwing them across the 3 cities, and they were doing the same, cutting off the Ottomans' heads and throwing them.
So these flying backwards and forwards.
These waters know so much stories and have seen so much of these wars that have happening in Malta.
Yeah, I guess if you're going to set up a siege situation, you've got to be prepared to wait for a long time.
Yes, they were attacked unexpectedly.
Novka,
Cheers.
it's been a great day.
Yes.
Thank you for showing me around
Truly hope that you have enjoyed it.
beautiful island, or at least some bits of it. I thought Medina was wonderful.
Yeah.
And to meet the mayor was a real pleasure. He's a great guy. And I'd just like to ask you before we go our separate ways, you live in this city, Valletta.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, what do you like about it? What's great about it?
Valletta, the great things about Valletta is that it's close to everywhere. You're practically in the center, quite easy to move from Valletta to south and north as you are in the central area. Lots of shops, stores, restaurants, nightlife for those who would like to enjoy a proper Maltese local dish. Lots of local restaurants as well. And the history and the architecture of Valletta, 18th century Baroque style buildings. The whole city, it's like an open museum. Each corner, every building has its story, and I'm sure that everybody who comes to Valletta falls in love with the city, with the town.
Well, I certainly have. I love it. And it's also one of the best sail-ins that I've ever experienced. It's just a beautiful city to sail into.
Yes.
And you sail right into the heart of it, and the city kind of wraps itself around you.
Yes, exactly.
No, it's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being my guide today. Novka, how do we say goodbye in Maltese?
So it's Saham.
Saham. Saham.
Saham.
Saham, and thank you for a great day.
You're welcome.
You can do that. Welcome to the bow, ladies and gentlemen. And to those of you watching on screens around the ship, and to those of you lining the balcony of the Explorer Lounge, big welcome to you. Now, traditionally, when we have a Viking naming ceremony, we use a bottle of aquavit and a chopping block of relevance to the godmother, which in this case is a piece of wood from Highclere Park, together with a replica of a Viking axe. But since we are in Malta, we felt it more appropriate to use a replica of the de Valletta sword. And so to tell us a little more about this sword and its significance, I would like to invite to the stage the president of the Maltese Association of the Order of Malta, Marchesino Daniel de Petri Testaferrata.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. A word of thanks to all the Viking family for their welcome here today. I feel greatly honored to be here to talk a little bit about the Order of Malta. The Order of Malta is a religious order. It uses its diplomatic connections around the world to carry out humanitarian projects in so many different countries. But yet in 1565, it was also an elite fighting force. We are in the epicenter of what was one of the most epic battles of all time, the Great Siege of Malta. Voltaire, that famous French philosopher, had stated, "Rien est plus connu que le siège de Malte." Nothing is as well known as the Siege of Malta. And it was so famous because this small band of knights managed, despite the huge outnumbering of the Ottoman forces, to defeat the invaders through sheer courage and grit. And, of course, by using the best weapons that were available to them at the time. This is a replica of the very sword used by the Grand Master de Valletta during the Siege of Malta. You can close your eyes and imagine him fighting in that fort just over there, Fort St. Angelo, repelling the invading Ottomans, using a sword identical to this. And at the end of the siege, when the siege was won and victory was ensured, he presented this very sword, the original of this very sword, to Our Lady of Damascus in a church just a few hundred meters away from here. You can imagine the Grand Master on his knees presenting this sword to Our Lady. And those of you who have been in the armed forces know that a soldier's weapon is his most prized possession. So for this elite warrior to give up his sword, to present it to Our Lady, is the most incredible of gestures of thanks. So in that gesture of thanks, I again thank Viking and the entire Viking family for the opportunity to be here this evening.
Thank you, President. Our godmother today, Fiona, the Countess of Carnarvon, will now conduct the naming ceremony from her home in Highclere Castle in England. For more than a decade, Viking and Highclere have been linked through the acclaimed series Downton Abbey, and, of course, in real life. So now I would like to ask Lady Carnarvon to please name her ship.
I name you Viking Mars. May God bless you and all who sail on you. I would now like to ask my seventh sister, Karina, to cut the ribbon and to name my ship.
And I'd like to ask Charlotte of Highclere Castle to join me in, on behalf of Lady Carnarvon, cutting the ribbon that names the Viking Mars.
Next time, I'm in Gozo, where I learn about its Christian heritage before exploring the island's beautiful landscape.